This week in CIST 2612, we'll look at Chapter 10, Virtual Machine Forensics, Live Acquisitions, and Network Forensics. In this chapter, we're going to look at the standard procedures for conducting forensic analysis of virtual machines, the process of conducting a live acquisition. We'll also look at network intrusions and unauthorized access, and also the standard procedures in network forensics and network monitoring tools. The use of virtual machines is something that's has become common for both personal and business use. So as a forensic investigator, you need to know how to analyze virtual machines and also how to use them to analyze other suspect drives as well. And we're going to discuss two types of hypervisors. That's a software that runs a virtual machine. Top one hypervisor, that's a virtual machine interface that loads on a physical hardware and it'll contain its own operating system. The top two hypervisor, that's a virtual machine interface that's loaded on top of an existing operating system. Top two hypervisors are the ones that are usually you find loaded on a suspect's machine. Top one hypervisors are typically loaded on servers or workstations that have a lot of RAM and storage on those. So first, let's talk about top two hypervisors. Now, the use of this type of hypervisor is to run legacy hardware that works only with specific operating systems such as Windows XP. Before installing a Type 2 hypervisor, you want to make sure you enable virtualization, the BIOS, before you attempt to create a VM, virtual machine. Virtual technology, that's Intel's CPU design for security and performance enhancements that enable the BIOS to support virtualization. A virtual machine extension, that's instruction sets that created for Intel processors to handle virtualization. When we're looking at the hypervisor 2, this is the most widely used type of top two hypervisors are parallel desktops. What they do is they're created for Macintosh users who also want to use Windows applications. The kernel-based virtual machine is for Linux operating systems. Microsoft Hyper-V, that's a new hypervisor that's built into Windows 10. VM Workstation and Workstation Player can be installed on almost any device, including tablets. They can install Microsoft Hyper-5 server on it, create encrypted Hyper-V server on it, and create encrypted virtual machines. They can also support 16 CPUs, 8 terabits of storage, and 20 virtual machines. So we see an example here. This is the default location of VMware Workstation Player files. This is when you create a new virtual machine. You would give it a virtual machine name and then the location. You can click the Browse button and change the location. Now, your most widely used type of hypervisors also include a VirtualBox that supports all Windows and Linux operating systems, as well as Macs, and they allow selecting types associated with other applications. And top two hypervisors come with templates for different operating systems. Now, we will talk about conducting an investigation with top two hypervisors. This doesn't differ a whole lot from a standard investigation. Now, you begin by acquiring a forensic image of the host computer, as well as also the network logs. That allows you to link the VMware's IP address to the log files so you can determine what websites the VM access. Now, if you want to determine whether the VM is on a host computer, You want to look in the user's documents or folders in Windows or directories, user directories in Linux. Check the registry, host registry for clues that a VM has been installed or uninstalled. Look for also the existence of a virtual network adapter. So we see the Ethernet connections on a Windows 10 computer. As we see here that we do have the virtual adapters have been installed. You also need to determine whether or not USB drives have been attached to the host. That could have the live VM software running on them. They can also be nested inside of other virtual machines on the host machine or a USB drive. So you want to make sure you look into the Windows system logs when the USB drives are attached, or search the Windows registry or system log files. See an example of a virtual machine that's nested inside of another virtual machine in this example here. Now, when we start to conduct our investigation with top 2 hypervisors, we do have a consistent procedure that we need to follow when we're conducting the forensics analysis. First, we want to image the host machine. Then we'll locate the virtualization software and the virtual machines. And using that information you've learned about file extensions and network adapters is how we will locate those. Export the host machine. Export from the host machine all the files associated with the virtual machine, including the log files, virtual adapters, snapshots. After you've done that, you record the hash values of these associated files. Typically, your forensic software can perform this task. Then you're going to open a VM as an image file in a forensic software and create a forensic image of it, or mount the virtual machine as a drive and then image it to do live research or do live research. Now, live acquisitions of virtual machines are often necessary because they include snapshots, all snapshots, which that's a record of the state of the virtual machine at that particular moment. Now, this only records the changes in the state, not a complete backup of the virtual machine. So if you're just acquiring an image of the virtual machine, those snapshots might not be included. So doing live acquisitions, make sure those snapshots are incorporated. Now, if you would like to look on your own system for evidence of a virtual machine, you can turn to page 426 in your text or on SimNet. And from following the steps on page, start on page 427, you can use those to acquire the image of a virtual machine if you have determined that one has been installed. Now, most forensic tools can also mount virtual machines as an external drive. Now, if you mount a virtual machine as a drive, you can make it behave more like a physical computer. This allows you the same standard exam procedures for a static hard drive. You can also make another method of examining a virtual machine is making a copy of its forensic image and then open that copy while it's running. This method alters evidence and might be considered a non-standard approach. The purpose of using a virtual machine to run forensics tools stored on a hard drive, USB drives, you can look on page 430 and see how you can set up a virtual machine on a USB drive. Now, having a good working relationship with network administrators and lead technicians can be helpful in most investigations. especially when you're working with type 1 hypervisors, because they are just they're installed directly on the hardware. So when working with these, the capability is limited to only the amount of available RAM, storage, and throughput. You do have some common type 1 hypervisors, VMware, vSphere, Microsoft, Hyper-V Server 2016, and so forth. Now, if you want to, you can follow the steps on page 433. And from there, you can install Zen Server as a virtual machine in VirtualBox. Now, live acquisitions, these are something that's especially useful when you're dealing with active network intrusions or attacks. They are done before taking a system offline, and also become a necessity because an attack might leave footprints only in the running processes or in RAM. These are something that don't follow typical forensic procedures when you're doing live acquisitions. So you'll look at the order of volatility. That's a term indicating how long an item on a network lasts. RAM and running processes might only last milliseconds. Items stored on hard drives can last for years. Now, the steps that we can look at, that we can do when we're performing a live acquisition, this includes first, create or download a bootable forensic CD or USB drive. Make sure you keep a log of all of your actions. Network drive is an ideal as a place to send the information you collect. You want to copy the physical memory or the RAM. Now, what you do next is going to vary. It's depending on the incident you're investigating. But you want to make sure that you get the digital forensic digital hash for all the files you recover during your live acquisition. There are several tools that are available to capture the RAM. Kali Linux, this would be the one that you will experience. There are GUI tools that are easy to use. Downfall of some of these is they often require a lot of system resources, and you might get a false reading in the Windows operating systems. Using the command line tools will give you more of a command, more of a control when you're performing a live acquisition. Network forensic, that's a process of collecting and analyzing raw network data and systematically tracking network traffic to determine how security incidents occur. So this is something we use to ascertain how an attack was carried out or how the event occurred on our network. Now, we do this because the intruders often will leave a trail behind. So if you know the normal behavior of your network traffic, you can identify any abnormal activity. And that abnormal traffic can be produced by internal bugs or real attacks also. So you can also determine when your network is under attack. And when you take the time to follow standard procedures, this is essential to ensure that all compromised systems have been found. These procedures must be based on an organization's needs and should complement the network infrastructure. NIST created the Guide for Integrating Forensic Techniques into Incident Response, and that's to address these needs. A couple of ways we can secure our network. One is using a layered network defense strategy. That's an approach to network hardening that sets up several network layers. That's to place the most valuable data at the innermost part of the network. We can also use the defense in depth. All right, this is the NSA's approach to implementing a layered network defense strategy. This defense in depth, it focuses on three modes of protection: people, technology, and operations. It's also very important that you test your network as well as testing servers. So you need to make sure that you are up to date on the latest methods intruders will use to infiltrate your networks, as well as methods of internal employees used to sabotage networks. One of the mindsets that small companies have is that they have fewer than 10 employees. They don't often consider security precautions against the internal threats necessary. They do become more susceptible to employees revealing proprietary information. Even small companies need to take security in mind and pay it its proper attention. Now, network forensics is a long and tedious process. There are standards protections for network forensics. This is something that's often used. First, you always use the standard installation image for systems on a network. Close any way in the network after an attack. So, fix those vulnerabilities after the attack. You want to attempt to retrieve all volatile data. You want to acquire all compromised drives and make forensics images. And from there you compare the forensic files on the forensic image to the original installation image. So you have your baseline that you start out with. Okay, and then after an attack, first you want to plug your holes, fix the way that the attack occurred, retrieve all of your volatile data and drives that have been compromised, and then compare the forensic image, the files that you have on the forensic image, to what you started out with on your standard installation. There are a difference between network forensics and digital forensics. Digital forensics, you can work from images to find most of the deleted or hidden files or partitions, while in network forensics, you're going to have to restore drives to be able to understand the attack that happened. Now, network logs, they record all traffic in and out of the network. You can use these logs. You can use logs from the following network components during an investigation. So you can use the logs from your network server, the routers, the firewalls. Once again, they're going to record all incoming and outgoing traffic. Now, the TCP dump command line program, that's a common tool for analyzing network traffic. What this do, can generate top 10 lists. It can identify patterns. Wireshark is also one of these tools that you can use. There are also other variety of tools that can be used. Splunk, Spicework can be used along with others. Packet analyzers can also be used. Those are devices or software used to examine network traffic. If you're using a TCP/IP network, they're going to examine the packets, which is where they pick up their names. They work most of the layer 2 or 3 of the OSI model, and then most tools follow the PCAP or the packet capture format. Some packets can be identified by examining flags in their TCP headers. And some of these tools that you'll use with packet analysis include TCP dump. We'll see an example of a TCP header, and it's got a flag here that will be flagged in the packet analyzer. Once again, we do see some more tools that can be used. Wireshark is one of the popular ones. You can look on page 442 and see how the Wireshark tool works. This is the opening window of Wireshark. This is a screen you have in Wireshark when you're following a UDP stream. We'll look at some of the information it's following here. For example, it's got the host IP address, location, the server that the traffic is flowing to. Now, one thing I want to mention that if other companies are involved in the attack, you must proceed as in a digital forensic investigation. You shouldn't reveal information discovered by other companies. If you have something like this happen, the best situation or the best course of action is to contact the other companies and from there enlist their aid in tracking down the network intruders. When we're investigating virtual networks, you need to modify your approach as compared to physical networks. So that's a little different. When we're looking at virtual switch, it's a little different from a physical switch because there's no spanning trees between virtual switches. Virtual switches grew out of people needing virtual machines, needing VMs on isolated networks, but they wanted them to reside on the same physical rack server as other virtual networks. There are some additional complications that hypervisors can assign MAC addresses to virtual devices, and those devices can have the same MAC addresses on different virtual networks. Things get even more complex when you're dealing with cloud service providers that host networks for several hundred companies. Some of these tools that you can use are capable of analyzing virtual networks include Wireshark or Network Miner. The HoneyNet project, this was developed to make information widely available in an attempt to thwart internet and network attackers. The objectives of this is awareness, information, and tools. A distributed denial of service attacks. This is a type of DOS attack in which other online machines are used without the owner's knowledge to launch an attack. So a major threat may go through another organization's network, not just your network. So they may use these zombies, or whether you have hundreds or even thousands of machines can be used. A zombie can be defined as a computer that's used without the owner's knowledge in a DDoS. We'll look at day zero attacks. That's another major threat where attackers look for holes in a network and operating system, and then they exploit those weaknesses before patches are available. So it's something they find before the vendor or network administrators have found those weaknesses. Honeypots are set up there. A normal looking computer that lures attackers to it, or honey walls that what they do is that's intrusion prevention and monitoring system. It tracks what attackers do to on the honeypots. So chapter 10 we've looked at using the hypervisors and virtual machines and conducting forensic investigations. Live acquisitions may be needed to retrieve volatile items such as RAM and running processes. We've also looked at network forensics and discussed items such as the honeypot project, tools that we can use to analyze our network, such as Wireshark.